everyone, welcome to a new video, welcome to my channel. My name is Maaike and today I want to talk about something a little bit differently because I sort of gave myself a little bit of a project at the end of 2019 and that's something that I definitely want to start doing more of in 2020. And what project is that? Is to reread my childhood favorites, because I haven't read these books in more than like 2 decades, and I used to have these on my shelves, but then they somehow disappeared in like different moves. And I was like, you know, I had all these books growing up and I loved them at the time. Like, would I still love them as an adult? So some of these I've already had for years, but I sort of browsed the internet and bought a couple of these secondhand as well towards the end of 2019, and I've been reading like very slowly, like once a month I've been like throwing one of them in there. And in case you didn't know, before I get to the books and show you what I'm reading, I'm Dutch and I grew up speaking Dutch, so the books I have are all Dutch books. None of these are translations, they are all by Dutch authors, and they are very Dutch books, you could say. So I thought it would be fun to share, especially if you're not from the Netherlands, to just give that different perspective. Because, you know, I think that if you're like, if you grow up speaking English, or if you grow up speaking French or German or Dutch, you will have different things that are sort of like standard to you. And it's like a really big cultural difference. And I just thought that I could show you what I read when I was a kid and what I'm thinking of rereading them, because I have reread a couple of these already, so I can sort of give you my thoughts. So these will be popping up in wrap-ups and stuff as well, so then I'll give you my full reviews. So when I was younger, I definitely read a lot of these like girly books. I remember this was one that I got for my birthday, and this is Cindy Ziet Ballet wel Zitten, which is about a girl called Cindy who starts taking ballet classes. And so I've already reread it. Like, I'm not sure if you can see this cover. Like, how retro is that? Like, I grew up in the 90s, so these covers are... Like, I also tried to, like, buy the ones that had the covers that I knew. And I remember getting this from a family member for one of my birthdays, I think when I turned 8 or 9, something like that. And it's one I reread a lot. It's a pretty fun book, I have to say. Because the reason they gifted it to me as well, because I was dancing, so they were like, okay, this is about dancing as well, so maybe you'll like it. But I was pretty surprised at how sort of judgy some of the characters are in this book. We have the main character called Cindy and then her 2 friends, and they all end up taking dance classes together. But one of the reasons why her mom suggests she should take a ballet is because she's too fat. I mean, this is a book aimed at 8-year-olds. I was quite shocked. I was like, this was like literally in there, like, yeah, you are a little bit too fat. And I was like, okay, that's great. That's a bit strange. But I also find out that now that I'm rereading it as an adult and just knowing a little bit more about life in general, that it's very much steeped in like Dutch culture as well. Like, they have dinner at 6 o'clock and it's like her and her little brother, like it's very Dutch. And I just thought that that was cool to see that. Other than that, the story isn't, you know, it's just a fun story about 3 friends who take ballet classes and then one of them hurts herself, and they want to do a school performance where they want to do the routine from their dance class, but then this one girl can't join them, and then they try to, you know, turn this like, oh no, what are we gonna do? They turn it into something really fun. So it's just a really nice sort of like fluffy sort of read, nothing too interesting or like life-changing, you could say. The next book I've been reading that I also already read is this, Floortje met de Klas op Stap. And this is an entire series about a girl called Floortje. And she has like all these different things that she does. And it's like, again, for like 8-year-olds, and like what an 8-year-old generally tends to do is like go to school and go on school outings. So this is about her going on a school outing. This series has been around since the 60s, and I think they didn't stop writing books in this series until like 10 years ago. So I think a lot of people in the Netherlands, if you're a girl, you probably grew up reading one of these. This is the one I had. And I remember there's apparently a couple about class outings, so it took me a little while to figure out what this was about. And this is just how I remember school outings going. You know, the teacher is stressed out. Is everybody still there? they end up getting lost and late to the bus. I mean, all that jazz. So it's again a fun read, very sort of nostalgia for me, not only because of the book, but also like the things that are going on in there, like the boys are stupid and the girls are like, nah, nah, nah. It's really that sort of thing. So this was enjoyable, but would I ever reread these two again? Probably not, but hey, I now have them. And then another little part of this project is to reread this series. And this is a 6-book series. There are no other books in the series, and I had all of these growing up. And it's called Hotel Rozenbottel, so it's about a hotel and different like adventures that these girls have at this hotel where one of them lives at. So the premise of this story is it's set in a hotel, like a little out of the way in a beach town on the Dutch coast, which is completely fictional. And this family runs this old hotel that it's a house they inherited from an aunt, and the mom has turned it into a hotel. And then you have their kids, and one of their kids is Lucy, and her friends do like summer jobs when they are there. And there's like different things going on in the hotel, and they're like little adventures, and they always tend to not be great adventures, you could say. Like it's always like, ooh, something is going on, and then it ends up being like a super logical explanation, but they sort of make it bigger as it is, which I think as a kid you tend to do that sort of thing. So they sort of like, ooh, who's this person? Like in one of these books, like some sort of like someone from the Middle East is like coming over to stay at their hotel and pretty much books all the rooms, and that they're there for a certain reason, and it ends up being like not that special in the end. But yeah, it's just, especially the characters in these books are super duper funny. So you have the 3 girls, and they are like normal, at least they think they are. Then the mom is like always super busy with the hotel. The dad is like a confused scientist, you could say. He kind of like forgets to untie his shoelaces, and that leads to like hilarity in the books as well. One of the characters is her older sister, and dad was so much wrapped up into mice when she was born that her name ended up being Mouse, which she's not happy with, and she's a hopeless romantic. So she's being made fun of all the time. Then she has twin brothers. One of them is like a little rascal, just climbing trees and outdoors all the time. And one of them is like a scientist like his dad, and he's only doing all these experiments in the basement, and he pretty much blows up the basement at least once in every book. So far I've reread the first 2, and I've been really enjoying these. I sort of can see why I like reading things now that I'm older, because it was something that I already enjoyed when I was a kid. So these have like little adventures, and there's always like a mystery, something that needs to be resolved. And it's just, it actually has pretty good characters in here too. So I do really enjoy these, and I've been just really liking it. So there's 6 books in total, and I can't wait to reread the other ones. I've just read the first 2 now. And then one of my OG favorite authors when I was a kid is Paul van Loon. I have a couple of other books by him sitting on my shelves, but this was the only one I owned. Like, I was a library kid, so I didn't own a lot of books. I just read them from the library. But this is one I had to track down, because this is a copy I owned of one of his famous series, which is De Griezelbus. And I'm not entirely sure anymore what the stories are in this, but it's like short stories, and they're like horror, urban fantasy, like it's vampires, mummies, witches, those kind of things, but for kids. And I always really loved his writing when I was a kid, and I remember at a certain point I outgrew it, and then I fell into this like black hole of not knowing anymore what to read, because these kind of books just weren't there for my age group once I sort of outgrew these. This is the 3rd installment, and I remember that being the one I had. I do remember a little bit of what was going on in the first book, which is like a school, like a group of kids going on this school bus, and they are going to be told like scary stories. And then I think at the end of the first one, the bus driver ends up being a skeleton, if I remember correctly. Like there's this like eeriness at the end, and that was like turned into an entire series. So pretty much what this is like there's a storytelling of like a group of kids being told all of these different stories. It's just, a book that I thought I could reread. Maybe I'll like it now that I'm a bit older as well. Again, I think that, like this series, I think that in this book I'm going to find a lot of the things, like a lot of the story elements that I really enjoy in books till this day. I don't think I will enjoy the story itself that much, because that's something that I have with all of these books. It's very much aimed at kids, so the language is super easy. It's all very much and then, like it's a straight storyline. There isn't that much going on. So yeah, this one I can't wait to read once I finish the series. And then last but not least, I have to show you this, because even if you're not Dutch, you may have heard of this. At least this is the books that are being recommended you read if you want to learn Dutch. And they are by Annie M.G. Schmid, and these have been on my shelves for years because I knew when I had a bit of extra money when I was a student. Actually, I was paid in bookshop vouchers for a while by my university when I helped out a few times, and then I just bought books that I thought were cool. So I have 3 books by her, and I think that if you're a Dutch kid, you grow up with Annie M.G. Schmid. So Annie M.G. Schmid was a Dutch author. She's no longer alive, sadly, but she wrote a lot of like children's stories and like scripts for TV series and songs and poetry and all that. And I think her most famous work is Jip en Janneke. And this is also fully illustrated by Fiek Westendorp. That's the name of the illustrator. So you get all these black and white illustrations. And the reason why this is all in black and white, apart from the cover, is because these stories were originally printed in a newspaper in the 50s. So that's why the pictures had to be black and white. And these 2 characters are just so beloved in Dutch culture. This also comes in an English version. So I think it's called Jip en Janneke, 2 Dutch Children or something like that. This has been translated because it is so quintessential to Dutch culture that if you are interested in knowing a little bit more about the Netherlands, then Jip en Janneke is definitely a good thing. It was written in the 50s, back when I think a lot of people felt like that was like quintessential Dutch culture. And this is just about a boy and a girl. The boy is called Jip, the girl is called Janneke. They have a dog called Takkie, and the cat is called Sipi. And they have all these, again, adventures, but like childish adventures. I believe there's one story I remember where they're both ill and where they find a Dalmatian dog, and like they just play and have these adventures, and it's about their sort of like little fantasy world of all the games that they are playing. But these are really great bedtime stories, actually. So they're all very short, like just a page per story. Like getting to get your hair cut, celebrating a birthday party, and like just all of the little games that kids come up with. So this was something that my parents read me before I went to bed, that I've read to my cousins when they were little, before they went to bed, and now we're reading this to my niece before she goes to bed. So this is just so steeped in Dutch culture, and I think such an important book. And I did reread all of these stories at some point. I should do it again. And then I have 2 books that when I was a kid, I read these as standalone. So these were the first like real books that I read by myself, like not the ones for like practice reading or anything like that, but like proper books. And one thing that I appreciate so much about Annie M.G. Schmid is that even though these are children's books, they are very much enjoyable when you read them as an adult as well. Especially this one, I feel, Pluk van de Plettenflat. And this is Orchha. So let me talk about this one first, because the other one is like my favorite. So Orchha is about a girl, Orchha. And again, the same lady who did the illustrations in the other books did the illustrations for all of these books. And her dad is a cook, and dad has a temper problem, and that's an issue because when he loses his temper, he's usually like let go of his job, and then they need to figure something out. And he has trouble finding another job because he lost his papers. That's all she knows. So at the start of the story, dad loses his job and they end up living in a van in the middle of nowhere. But she can also like talk to animals, and then at the end she also starts searching for dad's papers, and it's just really, really enjoyable. And I just remember this being one of the books that I read when I started being able to read properly. And I think my school teachers also read this to us when we were just when we were in that like phase of like learning how to read and things like that. But the one I have read the most and that I enjoy the most is this one. This is Pluk van de Better Flint, which is about a boy named Pluk, and he has this little red crane. I think he also has it's not on the picture, but he has a pet cockroach called Zaza, and he lives in a building, the Better Flint. So it's just this boy who lives in this building, and then again, all of his adventures. But this actually, when you think about it, it's pretty cleverly done, because you get to know all of the inhabitants in this apartment building that he lives in. There's a single dad with like 10 boys who make a mess. And then there's a complete opposite of this single mom with one daughter who's not allowed to get dirty, who becomes his like best friend. And then there's like a little park across the street, and then the government wants to change that into like some sort of like concrete playground kind of thing, and then the animals are not going to like that, and then he tries to make sure that that doesn't happen. And again, it's super inventive, also like from a language perspective, but you have to know enough Dutch in order to understand that. But they have so many like little things are in here that are super duper cool. And like everything that is happening in here is just, you know, so clever. It's just really cleverly done, and these stories just stay enjoyable till this day. So this is again one that I'm looking forward to rereading at some point this year. So I hope this was clear and interesting. Let me know in a comment down below what you were reading, what you were growing up. I definitely really read a lot of like very Dutch books when I was growing up. I think that at the time though, there weren't that many like translated books around, like not for kids. I think this like whole middle grade and like I think that in the 90s there just wasn't that much that sort of really was made for kids that was like more fantasy driven. Like there are a couple of things I think, but I think it's very like language oriented. At least that's how I remember it to be. So maybe it's just my brain. Maybe I was just not reading those things. That could very well be. Not entirely sure. But yeah, those are some of the books that I read when I was growing up, and that I'm trying to reread right now, and that I'm really enjoying doing, because they're very short. You can read them very quickly, and of course it's made for kids, so like an hour or so and then you've read the entire book. So that's been very, very enjoyable indeed. So I just wanted to make this video as a bit of fun. I hope you enjoyed it. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more by me. And I will make sure to put some of these books into my wrap-ups at the end of every single month to give you my final thoughts on them. So stay tuned for another video soon. Next week I will have my February wrap-up for you. So then I will be reviewing one of these. So I hope to see you in that one. Bye bye.